Hey, GLP-1 Plus SideZ community. Before we jump into the podcast, please take the time to leave us a 5-star review on whatever audio platform you're listening to the podcast on. Share your story and how the podcast has helped you. This will help us get referred up in the audio platform so that we can reach more people that need our help, our support, and guidance from our doctors. Help us get loud and change things. Are you interested in understanding GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, wegovy, or Mounjaro? Then join us on the Plus SideZ Cracking the Obesity Code, the groundbreaking podcast helping people change their lives one episode at a time. The Plus SideZ Podcast is a disruptor. We're breaking down barriers, smashing stereotypes, and sharing inspiring stories that'll leave you feeling informed and empowered. Join us every week to learn from doctors who are specialists around GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, wegovy, and Mounjaro. They'll provide you with science and facts to validate these incredible stories. But that's not all. We'll also bring you the voices of the GLP-1 Mounjaro TikTok community, real people who face the challenges of obesity-related diseases and disorders and discovered the incredible plus sides of GLP-1 medications. Our episodes are filled with heartwarming stories, laughter, and moments of triumph. You'll connect with our amazing community members who are reclaiming their health and experiencing their fullest lives. Are you ready to embark on a journey of discovery and empowerment? Tune in to the Plus SideZ Cracking the Obesity Code, and together we'll change the narrative around obesity and end the stigma. Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and join our incredible community. Let's celebrate the plus sides of life together, because every story deserves to be heard. Every life deserves to shine, and everyone deserves access to expert knowledge and medication. The Plus SideZ Podcast. You're not alone. It's not your fault.
"20 seconds a week to lose 20% of your weight in a year with diet and exercise." That's the power of GLP-1s through Ro. Ro helps find the medication that's right for you, based on cost, availability, and your weight loss goals. Losing weight with GLP-1s is possible through Ro.
Welcome
to the
podcast.
Hello.
Hello. Look, we have
OMG, technology.
How's everybody doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It's
Good,
a very
good.
interesting night to be doing the podcast. I'm
really
glad to have
is.
the distraction.
It is.
I agree.
I'm glad to have the distraction as well. Yes. But so for those who are listening, so we're recording this on the night of the election. So, I think we're all a little anxious, but we are excited to be here and talking about a subject that's really important to us. And we have a special guest tonight. So it's going to be a little different this evening. And I'm glad to have you here. I think that some of you, here's what I'm going to ask. Okay. I'm just going to, all right, listen up. When I used to be in technology and product marketing, I got certified in something called Agile Scrum. Come with me. I have a point. Bear with me. Okay. And when we were switching from like waterfall methodology, which is like a way of going about building products, this sort of Agile Scrum, it was a completely different way. And I remember in our training, he was starting to tell us how to do things differently. And like half of the audience would just move back and cross their arms, kind of get in a defensive stance, right? Because these people had been certified and been doing this for years in this certain way. And he said, open your mind and uncross your arms. So this evening, I would really like if you would open your mind and uncross your arms, because we are here to have a candid conversation and learn as much as we can about the landscape of where things are going with these medications, with these treatments for obesity, and different options that are available to us, because we want to move towards healing and growth and change. So uncross the arms and let's invite in our guest. Hi, Geoff. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
We're so glad to have you.
We're excited.
One of the questions that we always ask our people when we get started is, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you help people?
Sure. So, I'm Geoff Cook, and I am the CEO of Noom. I came to Noom relatively recently. It was only about 14 months ago. I, prior to this, built a company that I had founded and took public and then sold and ran for 18 years. until its sale to a large German company. And that company was really about helping folks make meaningful connections. It had a live streaming video platform. It was quite the journey. Kind of came in a number of different chapters. What drew me to Noom, and I think, how do I help people? I guess the how I specifically help people is in a number of ways, but in the mission of Noom, we empower everyone everywhere to live better longer. And what drew me to Noom originally was I'd spent 18 years building out really human connection, helping folks make meaningful connection, and that I viewed as like our Surgeon General, as a dimension of wellness. And folks live longer if they have meaningful connection than if they don't. It's equivalent to a multi-pack a day cigarette habit. And so what I saw in Noom was really this potential to broaden beyond a single dimension of wellness into multiple dimensions of wellness. Of course, nutrition, but also fitness, mental health. And so I kind of thought this was an interesting time because I saw that there was so much change. And so, I guess if I had to say how we help people, I think the most high-minded version of that is that we help people live better longer, and we look to improve their health span.
Yeah. So Geoff, before you joined with Noom, did you have any personal experience with obesity in your family or with you or with anyone you know? I saw recently an article from one of your employees that I thought was really, really good. I saw his lecture too at the conference, but I'm curious of you coming into being with Noom, what you thought of all of that.
Yeah. So, when of course, I have personal connection to it. Not myself, but certainly folks in my family. And when I was originally considering Noom, it was conversations with my mother and my sister, which actually led me to it. My sister was actually a big fan of the company. I didn't even realize that until I brought up Noom to her, and she showed me kind of her graph and her rank within the platform. So I think that was clear. And then when I was just chatting with folks in my kind of friend group, it was self-evident that many people felt positively influenced by Noom. And so I took that as an important kind of data point as I kind of thought about, is this a platform that can be helpful?
Great. I'm going to chime in here. Good. So can we begin exploring like Noom's foundation and background? Can you share with us how the company was initially started and what key principles drove to its early mission?
Yeah. So, and again, I'm not the founder of Noom, but our founders, Seju Jung and Artem Pedikov, they spent more than a decade building Noom out as a holistic health and wellness tool. I think their key insight was that behavior change and how people make choices, the little choices that are made 100 times a day, are really what kind of sum up to improved longevity and wellness. And so I think it was one of the first. I'm sure timing was very helpful, but it was one of the first behavior first platforms that really came into the public consciousness, and it was known predominantly for its psychology-based tools and cognitive behavioral therapy approach to creating and building a sustainable health first kind of mindset. And so that that kind of really hit the zeitgeist, I would say 2019 to 2021. They had been working on it much longer than that.
Yeah.
But, I think when people think of the Noom brand, many people to this day, think, oh, there's that psychology based mindset tool for losing weight. I think the founders always wanted to see Noom expand beyond just one dimension of wellness. Had launched things like Noom Mood in the past, and I kind of have taken up now that mantle to kind of bring Noom in directions beyond just nutrition.
So Geoff, I work for a company that does telehealth, and we're an obesity clinic, and we've got tens of thousands of customers now. And what we're seeing is with the emergence of the GLP-1 therapies and advancements in obesity medicine, that there's a movement away from diet culture, away from focusing on intense calorie counting and moving to GL supporting calorie counting, like measuring protein and fiber and things like that. And I'm seeing that take a pretty big hold. Are you guys seeing that? And how are you adjusting to it? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If I were to go 5 years out, 10 years out from today, I think the way we really see Noom kind of in the ecosystem is as this guide to help folks kind of live better longer by bringing in to play the wearables people might be wearing, the Apple phone and the Apple Health integration, getting step data, heart rate data, food data, what people are, of course, are ingesting, bringing AI to bear to kind of make sense of all that data, to put the right insight in front of your coach to be able to help you achieve whatever that goal might be, but also to help you map through this fairly more than fairly, quite complicated map of peptides, hormones, nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals that can really make a difference in one's kind of health span and longevity, but can be quite difficult. And right now is more or less virtually the exclusive domain of the very wealthy who are kind of dealing with, who are able to spend, a few $1,000s a month on peptides and go to go around the world to get their stem cells, injected, right? Like, so, I think Noom is positioning itself as, for one, and this is now an age of course, medically assisted weight loss. We are positioning ourselves as the ultimate companion to the medically assisted weight loss journey, right? So one of the first things that I did as coming in as the new CEO is really focus on two things. One was building out the GLP-1 companion product. We didn't have that. And so what the GLP-1 companion product is of Noom is it takes the program that, to your point, I think has calories at the forefront. It switches that and says, well, let's make protein at the forefront. We added macros to the program, but really it's about protein, because when you're on a GLP-1, it is so easy because the caloric restriction just from the medication is so palpable that you can get, you could be sated very quickly. And so by being able to mind that I must get my protein, it really helps folks one, achieve their Noom coin for the day. We do gamify the experience. We make it easy to find thousands of high protein recipes. We added those in the last year. We give you a workout, a resistance training workout that was curated from an obesity doctor that we have on staff, to be accessible workouts, and are generally aimed at resistance training. And ultimately what the GLP-1 companion is trying to be is that adjunct that it says right on the label you should be using if you're on a GLP-1. So it says right on the label of these medications to be used as an adjunct to diet and exercise. The medication is the adjunct. And so, we set out to transform the Noom behavior program into that adjunct, or into that program. And, one of the things we've recently added to it is the ability to scan for body composition, because when you're on a GLP-1, you want to avoid sarcopenia. You don't want to have your fat composition kind of go up. You want to maintain the muscle you have, and so we wanted to bring that metric into the program as well.
Tell us more about that. I think that's one of your more advanced offerings compared to other options out there. How does it compare to, say, like a DEXA scan or that type of thing?
Sure. So, we found in our research, something along the lines of 3% of people have had DEXA scans. So DEXA, of course, is the gold standard in body composition, but it's also inaccessible for most people. And even when we ask, do you have a kind of a smart scale at home? That's of course a higher percent, but it's still a small minority. And so we wanted to bring in that sort of scan. And so what we did was we basically scoured the landscape of these apps. Many of them had raised tens of millions of capital to train neural networks in order to do this well. We kind of settled on the one we liked. And the difference with that one is it took a 10-second scan. So you kind of wear form-fitting clothes, you spin around. I've done it many dozens of times myself. And it comes back with metrics related to body composition, but various other metrics as well. And
that sounds fun.
It did. It actually can be fun. It was actually very different than what we had seen in the wild, which was often many of these solutions are based on only two photos, a front facing and a side facing. And the much richer 10-second video enables more accurate results.
Nice.
That's awesome. I'm curious. So I want to be like very candid and have an open discussion. So in terms of, I would tell you the muscle loss, as people in this community that have been on these medications, especially those of us who've been on it for a long time, I would tell you it's the media narrative around the muscle loss thing just makes it seem like if you're on these medicines, you're going to lose muscle. It's eating your muscle and all these different things. So I like the fact that you are incorporating the increased protein and strength training, because I think what we also, a lot of people don't say, is if you're on any kind of diet, right, any kind of calorie restriction, like losing muscle is something you need to do, or something that will happen. Like if you're not eating enough protein and if you're not doing enough strength training. So I think it's really good though, because I will tell you, and I'm very open about this. I started this in July of 2022 and I didn't know squat. There was nothing. And just me and a bunch of people got on TikTok and were like, you doing this? I don't know. I'm doing this. We'll figure it out. And that's what it's been like ever since. Right. And so the need for, I wouldn't even say some sort of structure. And the reason I say that is because it has to be said that in terms of diets and the restriction and many, I'll be careful about competitors, but many types of companies that have definitely played the blame shame game with people that had obesity and had regained many times, like with the way the culture was. There's a lot of trauma in this community for people that have struggled with constant regain and lived in a big body for a long time. So I think sometimes when we say structure, when we say diet, when we say those different things, I think that it's hard for them to necessarily get on board, And so I think that I wish that there had been someone to guide me around knowing about, maybe I'd still have a butt. I'm not going to lie. Like it'd be great. Like the whole Mounjaro butt thing, that's a thing, because I really didn't have anybody telling me these things. And ultimately with all of the diets I've been on my whole life, you would think like I would know about it, but I didn't. I had no idea what to do. So I think like guidance, right? And focusing on nutrition and then the types of movement that you can do to be able to like preserve your muscle is very good. And I'm glad that you offer that because and the body composition I think is very good as well. I'm wondering, and you may not know, and that's okay, if you're seeing people resistant to wanting to have any kind of measurement at all, because we do see that in the community. We do see people not want to go with certain doctors because they want to track and monitor on a scale, like from telehealth. Have you seen any kind of thing like that?
Yeah. I mean, we certainly see folks who prefer not to engage in the scan. And of course that's a choice you can make in the app. There's no requirement.
Okay.
We certainly do see that, I would say on the body mass, kind of the muscle loss. I've seen research obviously suggesting as much as 40% of the weight lost is muscle. And the difference with a typical diet, I don't actually believe that the medicine itself is somehow eating away the muscle. I don't have any sense of that.
Yeah, that's been my research.
Right. What I do believe is that the caloric, the ability to sustain that sort of caloric deficit for that period of time is simply almost impossible to do with anything other than a medication. And if habits aren't changing alongside the medication, and then that's how you get into that extreme kind of muscle loss situation. And we don't just deal with it. We certainly do deal with it on the resistance training and the protein eating. We also deal with it on the dosing, which is a little bit unique, I think, to Noom in terms of personalizing the dosing regimen, up titrating where it's well tolerated, looking for 1 to 2 pounds of weight loss a week, not 4 to 5 pounds, which many people experience. And so deciding when to up titrate, no one, like we obviously vomiting and there's some severe, gastrointestinal side effects that can be associated with this. We seek to minimize those as much as humanly possible by not just following the standard dosing protocol and going kind of what we call, low and slow.
Yeah, I actually think that's great. Just like I've been on all of these because of shortages and insurance requirements and step therapy and all of the different things. Like I've been on the diabetic versions, I've been on the obesity versions, same thing, but it is what it is. And I will tell you what I have found, and I'm sure that like from the TikTok community, and I don't think it's going anywhere because the need or I think a lot of people, when they go to their doctor doesn't know any of this. It's very, very common. I think it's changing and I think it's evolving, but the people come to our lives and go, I'm sick, I'm vomiting, I'm this, I'm that, right? Because they don't, but why? I think people don't think about, like, back to behavioral. Why are they in our live asking us about vomiting and not talking to their doctor, right? And I will tell you, my perception has been, after doing this for quite a while, that it's because of trust and because they think it's the last resort. So it's lack of education, it's lack of knowledge is one of the reasons we started Plus SideZ.
And they don't want their meds taken away.
They don't want their meds taken away because they think like, this is it for me. This is the only thing. I've tried everything else, right? And again, I think that if the doctor knew more and could have a conversation about how that's not true. Like there are many things that we can do and options that we have. This is the end all be all, or the only thing that's available, So I guess where I'm going with that is when it comes to the slow titration, I think that's actually really good because there are some doctors who will only follow the protocol of the studies and rush people up every month to 15 milligrams of, zepbound, which makes people very sick. And then it gives a bad name to the medicines and to what we consider a movement and all of that because of that. So I do think that's great that you've thought about those things. I'm not sure that there are a lot of telehealth. I mean, I know a few that are great, but that have done that,
Yeah. So Geoff, I'm seeing in just the medical space at large, there's a movement towards more virtual medicine and specialty clinics like Noom does and like Fridays does. How does that look to the patient with you guys, the back and forth with the provider, or is it all doctors? Are you also using nurse practitioners? Is it in-house providers? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so it's a combination of in-house and contractor MDs. They're all doctors. Nurse practitioners is certainly something we may add to the program at some point. And it tends to be asynchronous care unless there's something that needs to be discussed in person. I would say the average case would be asynchronous. So you fill out a comprehensive intake, and you begin this journey, and we're getting feedback on your weight loss through the logging of weight. We're getting side effect information, and you're receiving different asynchronous appointments with your clinician over time, and they're up titrating you kind of based on what they're observing and you're experiencing. So, we were kind of compelled by some studies that basically show with 40% of the medication on a GLP-1, you can achieve 70 to 75% of the weight gain, of the weight loss. And that's with respect to, without regard to behavior change addition. And so, we generally like, the concept of doing kind of more with less, because the reality is many people do come off the med, some studies 6 out of 7. And if that's the case, obviously, if you were, in your example, ramped up to this massive dose of tirzepatide, 15 milligrams, which is a monster dose.
Yes.
It's also what the pharma companies would suggest you should be on for the rest of your life.
Yes.
But, or 2.4 of semaglutide.
Right.
When that's withdrawn, that's an enormous amount of food noise that comes roaring back. Because typically when it's withdrawn, it might be because insurance was lost, or a job was changed.
Right.
And it wasn't because it was titrated down in some intentional way.
Right.
And so, there's just no way that's set up for long-term success.
Yeah.
And so I think, we generally have kind of thoughtfully kind of worked through our clinical protocols, but of course they're always evolving as we get more information.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
a good
I think it's
segue.
good. I think it's good that you're
Yeah.
because I think we're still learning. I don't think people. I mean, we know these medicines have been around for a long time. I think the availability, accessibility, and people knowing about them and all of that sort of boomed right over the past couple of years. But I think that there's still so much that we're learning, especially how this can help people maybe that have insulin resistance, but maybe don't qualify necessarily with a BMI and things like that. Is that anything you guys are exploring? Are you only prescribing these for people that have a defined, certain BMI that is the criteria?
Yeah. So, right now the program will not prescribe for anything less than 27 BMI. It's something that we are looking at. There's certain populations where 27 is actually not a reasonable standard, that it could be lower. But that's where we are today. And, but it's something we always evaluate.
Okay. Cool. Kat.
Okay. Well, I'm going to elaborate on that. So we saw Noom's recent campaign suggesting that Ozempic doesn't have to be for life. And it's sort of a debate on that, back and forth, does it or does it not? But what sort of message does Noom aim to convey with to the public with that statement?
Yeah. So, I think the conventional wisdom is of I would say, pharma company and establishment would be to be on the med for the rest of your life. And we think that flies in the face of what is actually the fact on the ground, which is, 6 out of 7 people stop by month 24, 2 out of 3 by month 12. And so there's no world in which people are on it for the rest of their life. And so being told that like this is what you're supposed to be on for the rest of your life, but then having it not be paired with any long-term sustainable habits, we generally just think is problematic. So I think the message we're trying to send is, one of empowerment, flexibility, that we certainly prescribe and would be willing to prescribe, and our protocols call for prescribing GLP-1s for long-term for folks who kind of come in with a particular BMI and particular conditions.
Okay.
So certainly there's going to be plenty of people who it is indicated for, even according to Noom's protocols. And for others, if they would wish to, decide to taper off the medication, and they can tap a button essentially to begin a taper protocol. They can discuss that with their clinician as well. What that effectively does is it changes the content of the digital program, the Noom behavior change program, and it starts to prepare you for that taper off over the course of the next 2 to 3 months. And so that will involve down titrating you. So your clinician will down titrate you eventually to, and not everybody actually titrates to 0, right? Like some folks will just titrate to a maintenance dose, but it could titrate to where you believe you should be and where you think you can sustain. Then the program kind of does start coming back with, bringing calories to the fore, less about protein, the cognitive behavioral therapy, mindset aspects start becoming more to the fore. The resistance training, becomes a little less, in your face and required. And so, our goal is to basically meet people where they are. They come in, obviously, all different, areas. Some people want to lose. Some people want to lose a certain amount of weight. Some people actually don't want to afford. As you can imagine, Noom, especially on the medication plan, is expensive if you're thinking about being on it forever. And so we see people thinking, well, look, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to kickstart my weight loss journey with the medication, and then I'm going to sustain it. And maybe I'll need some medication from time to time, but I'm going to sustain it. And so for some people, that may be a budget conversation. That may be a budgetary reason. For some, it may just be a desire not to be on a med for forever. But like that's how it's coming. And one of the interesting bits that we really think has some legs here is when you start. One of the hardest things that Noom has had to deal with is obviously helping people change habits that are long entrenched, right? Like that's just very, very, very difficult. And one of the things that does make a difference, and Noom's data shows makes a difference, is early successes, early wins. And people in a weight loss journey, of course, they measure successes by the scale. And if they're not achieving that, there's a good chance, if that month 1 didn't see some weight loss reward for the effort paid, that person is not going to adopt those habits. If you can adopt the healthy habits at the same time as the medication, you can get this self-reinforcing effect where you are getting kind of reliable weight loss, in part, of course, because of the medication and its effect, but you feel like you're also getting healthier at the same time, and you're being rewarded one way or the other through scale victories. And so I think it actually is a very interesting time to pair the behavior change with the medication, because I think, like James Clear, Atomic Habits, I'm sure folks have read it, like it's going to be much more likely you're going to sustain a habit if you can do it 12 weeks, 16 weeks, consistently. So I think that concept there's this aspect in cognitive behavioral therapy of self-efficacy, right? Like if you don't have self-efficacy, if you don't believe change can happen, then it doesn't, because that's, of course, kind of just a truism. And so a lot of Noom's lessons have been, to convince folks that they can do it, and then they see they're doing it, and then the habit can withstand. So I think there is there's a there in kind of combining the medication with habits.
Right. I'd like to push on that just a tiny bit, because I do think our TikTok audience is slightly different. I'm guessing, having used Noom before myself, that it's people who want to cement their habits and do things. But we see so many people who have changed their habits before, who are exercising, who are doing these other things that you're talking about, and still hit that point when they hit that percentage of loss, that the appetite systems kick back in, and then they can't fight that anymore. And this is where the drug comes in on the appetite side versus the metabolic issues and the inflammation. Do you think it's just a factor of we have different audiences, or are you seeing a percentage of your people? How do you address that? Because, lots of people who are overweight, from what we hear, is they've done it before and they've changed their habits before. And it's just, you just hit that point where you can't sustain it because the appetite kicks in so hard.
Yeah. And so, I think Noom has, as a behavior change program, it is one of the best in driving long-term sustainability. That being said, there's many people who don't sustain the weight loss. And I think the metric is 2/3 of folks who at 2 years sustained important weight loss. But in any event, there's many who won't. And
so is that why you added GLP-1s on, is in recognition that people are doing it and not having long-term success?
Yeah, I think it's ultimately a combination of many things, right? I think it's biology. I think it's psychology. I think there's this aspect of, 10 years from now, I think it'll be more and more antiquated to begin a weight loss journey without some form of medical intervention, whether it's a pharmaceutical or some form of peptide. I think that, and obviously people come at us at different stages. A postmenopausal woman is going to have increased insulin sensitivity, and is in many cases, and is going to have difficulty, even if they were to engage in all the same healthy habits, is going to have difficulty achieving the same weight loss as someone who isn't postmenopause. So it's kind of meeting people where they are, and you kind of have to have this real sense of their kind of holistic wellness, right?
I can appreciate that, Geoff. What I hear you saying, and if I'm incorrect, please let me know, is that you're aware that there are bodies that struggle with insulin resistance, right? And that they may be at different levels, right, of that. Some people may have severe insulin resistance, right? While others may be only moderately. And I think that it's been harder to kind of recognize, but even with you talking about the way that you would titrate, because there's someone that is maybe severely insulin resistant that will need to go to the highest dose of the medication before they see any results, while some people may be able to be on the lowest dose and lose all of their weight, right? Because everybody's body is different. And I am encouraged to hear any kind of company, especially one that I will tell you from people we associate until recently with these changes, or we're trying to make that shift, right? As a diet company. Like, even though it's behavioral change in an app, I will tell you that many people see Noom as another diet. And I like the idea that there's a change and like a shift in this. And I'll tell you that when it comes to like therapy, for example, so we've had a cognitive behavioral therapist on the show as well. And I think what it was for me is when my body was, whenever that cycle that I just couldn't break, like when the medication got in there and started regulating, I was in a place to receive therapy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It was very difficult to get anything to stick. because my body was always coming back and fighting me. And we know, right? We know that the body is defending the set weight. The doctors that come on our show talk about that at length, right? They talk about those with obesity specifically, right? I think it's a little different when maybe it's somebody that's struggling with weight, maybe at a certain stand, right? My mom was a big, I want to lose 20 pounds percent, like her whole life, right? And she yo-yoed forever on things like Weight Watch. We used to have conversations, Jeff, where my mom would go, I think it's time for me to get on Weight Watchers again. And I'm like, there's something wrong with this. Like, what, you know what I mean? Like that conversation, I knew, like, what again, like, but it's supposed to be like the diet you need forever. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I'm encouraged, and we have some people in our community who have used Noom in the past. And I think the combination of the tools that you're offering plus the medicine is very interesting. And I would love to talk a little bit about like accessibility and affordability, and kind of what I'm a marketer, and kind of what your like go-to-market strategy has been to be able to help people, right? From like an enterprise perspective, as well as like, to a consumer. How are you going about getting this in the hands of the people that are sick so that they can get better mentally and physically?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Access is incredibly important. When I joined Noom 14 months ago or so, I inherited the original GLP-1 product, which was a completely brand name, zepbound, wegovy sort of product. And one of the very first things I asked was, well, what percentage of folks are actually getting the medicine in their hands, right? And that was actually a really hard question, apparently, to get to the bottom of. But as we did, the answer was not very many. And the reason was people would come in and they would pay for this consultation, and there would be a clinical visit. Those at that point were synchronous clinical visits. And a prescription would be written, and of course the care coordinator would try to find supply, but the meds were just not in the pharmacy. They weren't in the local pharmacy. They weren't really available at a mail order. They were just not available. And then even for those folks who had availability, they may not have the right insurance, and they might be available, but they might be, $1,000, $1,300. And so, I think one of the first things I noticed was, of course, GLP-1s are just extraordinarily expensive in the United States, 5 to 10 times their price elsewhere. And they're out of supply for the most part. They're difficult to access. And so the answer to that question is less than 10% of people were actually going through our program and getting the medication in hand. And so we kind of just looked at, well, how can we fix that? Obviously, we hope for a future where brand name meds are affordably priced. That to me means, they're sold at.
That is why we're all here. That's what we want.
Yeah.
It should be sold at the same price you could buy them at London, right? They're $149 in London. There's something like that in Germany. It's really problematic that they're this expensive in the United States. The list price, of course, $1,300 for wegovy for really any dose, which of course is another kind of strange bit, because there's 10 times more active medicine in the highest dose than the lowest dose, but the medicine has no bearing. The pricing of the medication has nothing to do with the amount of medicine. It's just what the market will bear. And so that was clearly true. It was clearly true that despite the very high price, or maybe in part because of it, it was just hard to access, even if you could pay it. And so we went down the compounded route, and that was a big decision for Noom. Right now it seems like it's everywhere, but at the time we made the decision, it was probably back in February or March, we kind of really analyzed that it could be done in a way that we thought was trusted. And I kind of had to learn, as you can imagine, the finer points of the 503A, 503B regulatory framework,
Yeah.
and we went with the 503B pharmacy. We visited the pharmacy. 503B pharmacies are regulated by the FDA. Many of them are also creating generic medications, as was the case with ours. And they're creating, in our case, non-EpiPen epinephrine for hospitals. And 90% of hospitals are getting compounded medications in some form or another. And we saw, semaglutide, compounded semaglutide, coming off of the same line as generic non-EpiPen epinephrine. And so that built some faith. But we also hired third parties. 503Bs need certificates of analysis on every batch. You kind of know what you're getting. And so, we got comfortable with it. And I would say we launched it in early September. So not very long ago.
Right.
And immediately was just a dramatic move where it's now almost 20% of our new subscribers are on the medication plan. And that's 2 months ago. Right.
Right.
And so we're seeing that kind of strong interest. There's plenty of folks who come to Noom because they're looking for the weight, something to address weight without a med. But there's plenty of folks who are coming to Noom because they view it as kind of an interesting, smart, novel way to lose weight. And I think if you're looking for that, medicine is a very rational thing to think you would involve in your program, especially now in this age of the GLP-1. So,
well, that brings me to a question I wanted to ask, which is, I would love to hear your plans or what your insights into if semaglutide comes off the shortage list.
Food has definitely been a very dominant voice in my head. That's not the main focus anymore. Dieting, exercising, and adding GLP-1s through Row is a game changer. I have such a sense of mental freedom since I started with Row. Food no longer controls my thoughts. Family time used to revolve around food, and now it revolves around what we're gonna go do together.
Yeah, so, clearly, so for folks who don't have the full background, 503A and B pharmacies are able to make essential copies, basically the same thing, essential copies anyway, of medicines that are on the FDA shortage list. And that has been the case for the last couple of years. Now, a medicine that comes off the shortage list, and there is some expectation that semaglutide would come off the shortage list next year. Like that is quite possible. When a medication comes off the shortage list, then the question is, well, can we get you the brand? Can we get you a good price on the brand name medication? We still have our brand name program. We never stopped it. 90% of folks do choose the accessible, more affordable version, but not if, of course, if you have good insurance. If you have good insurance, the brand name version is going to be less expensive for you. And so we try to route those people to that program. And our hope is that if it's actually accessible and not just declared accessible, that it will mean that it's actually in supply at your local pharmacy. I think we've seen FDA kind of scrutinize the end in tirzepatide to kind of let's make sure, let's pause a beat and make sure it's accessible. I hope that that's the conversations that are going on, and we hope that informs the decision it makes with respect to semaglutide. So one, of course, is brand name meds. Another would be generic liraglutide. That is coming off patent, I believe, this month. It's a GLP-1 that is an earlier one than semaglutide. Still efficacious, but tends to have lower persistence because it's a once a day injection. We're certainly looking at that. And then, of course, there's non-GLP-1 anti-obesity meds, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with, Contrave, metformin. Not all of these, of course, are indicated for anti-obesity, but many are used this way. But then there's also non-essential copy formulations of GLP-1s. And so in a time of shortage end, you can continue to compound the medication in certain situations when it's to the individual benefit of a patient, and when it's it has to be in the individual benefit of a patient, and that often means like there's a different method of administration. So you're seeing sublingual semaglutide, sublingual tirzepatide. You'll continue, no doubt, to see post-shortage. You'll likely see these injectables with some other formulation. So, for example, with a vitamin, but it has to be a vitamin not otherwise available through an FDA-approved method. But you're going to see some of this. I've seen in the wild. I've seen glycine. I've seen L-carnitine. So glycine arguably helps with muscle retention, and I think L-carnitine maybe with calorie with protein burning. But in any event, you're going to see these different copies come on. Now, what is the big question? And these non-essential copies clearly meet the bill in terms of meeting kind of I think the letter of the law. But you also have two extremely powerful pharmaceutical companies with endless cash, and how will that affect who could be proved to be quite litigious, presumably? And so I think we're about to sail into uncharted waters with the shortage, when that moment of the shortage end comes. Now, I do think that we certainly urge and have urged policymakers to use caution, because we think, and obviously this is a difficult thing to assess, but we've talked to many different 503 pharmacies, many different 503B pharmacies. We've kicked the tires of a number of these in the sense of determining their capacities. We think there's more than 1 million people on compounded semaglutide or tirzepatide.
Yeah, arguably, yes.
Absolutely. I've heard as high as 2 million at this point.
Yeah, I would think that that's a low number, the 1 million. I agree. And so, I think the reality is what would be, I think, tragic is if a shortage is declared over, and the end result of that shortage being declared over is that the medication has never been more difficult to access in the country, right? That would be, and 2 million people lose access to their obesity and diabetes medication. Now, some of those people, of course, may well be able to afford the brand name meds, but few, because if they could, they would almost certainly, if they had the good insurance, they would be on it already.
Right.
And so, that's the situation I think we're heading towards, and we hope policymakers use caution, because we do think, and we think we've looked at the law, right? Like, and the rules related to this. There are only so many factors they can look at when ending a shortage, but one of them is demand. And there's nothing that says on the books they have to only look at demand for the, high price, 10 times the price of, everywhere else in the world, medication. The demand for the med at $2.99 per month, they could look at that and say, well, where are these 2 million people going to get their meds? Is there a solution for them? Now, Lilly, has a Lilly Direct program, and that's a nod in the right direction, I think. But it's still quite a bit more than the compounded program.
And it still has its problems, and practically speaking, with availability.
I've heard that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you guys, I think I understood that you guys you have some pretty big players, part of your corporate program. Are you finding you're making waves and starting to roll benefits managers and people into understanding a future ROI of investing and covering these, or adding your plan in when they do cover them? What are you guys doing with that?
We do have I think Noom is known for its consumer product, and it's mostly a consumer product. We do have an enterprise business that launched about 2 years ago. And I was actually at the health conference where we met and announcing 2 new programs that kind of bring GLP-1s more into the heart of the enterprise program that Noom offers. And one of them is in partnership with a company called Waltz Health, which is kind of a pharmacy network. We're able to deliver medication to the door. Now, these are always brand name meds because in the enterprise space, it's brand name meds that tend to get the attention because the shortage end is so uncertain. And so you have to have a good brand name program if you're even to contemplate a compounded program. But we get brand name meds to folks. We have a good price through our pharmacy network on those meds. Obviously, still quite a bit higher than the compounded price, but far lower than the $1,300 list price. It's kind of and then we combine that with the behavior change program, and we ultimately are looking to make employer more to help make it easier for employers to say we're gonna cover the GLP-1 because we do know that 80% of folks who 80% of employees with obesity, more than 80% expect the meds to be covered, and they of course they should, because they expect a disease to be treated. And so but many plans and employers just can't pay this extremely high pharmaceutical company set price. And so we try to create the most affordable version of that program we can with as constrained by some of the pricing that we have today. And then for the folks who don't want to cover it because of the price in most cases, we offer, as we've continued to offer, the Noom obesity suite for the behavior change, but we've added this year a discount on our non-branded, compounded glutide. And so the pitch here is, yes, even if you don't cover it, give your employee a pathway to the lowest price access to that medication they can get. And so that seems to be resonating. They both seem to be interesting of the moment products, but it's super early. We just announced them less than a month ago, and we hit the market with them in January 1st. We'll happy to report back some other day on how that goes.
Are you open to talking about legislation at all? And I ask because we went to Plus SideZ went to the Senate hearing, the Help Committee. And, they were discussing PBMs, right? And the issue kind of with pharmacy benefits managers. And, let's put it this way. They had the CEO of Nowhere Norris there to ask some questions about the list price. But ultimately, the finger pointing kind of went back to, I can't tell you what the list price is because ultimately it's different for every single one of your PBMs. And it was my take from it that he was saying, hey, listen, like I want more of your people like on Ozempic and Wegovy, of course, right? Or whether it's liraglutide, whatever it may be. He was like, but I'm telling you that there have been times like with insulin where I dropped the list price and the PBMs dropped me off the plan, right? And then Bernie was like, well, actually, I have commitments from 3 PBMs that say they won't do that. And he was kind of like, and I think if you don't really know what's going on with this like space, when that hearing was going on, you probably don't like we're in it, right? We breathe, eat, sleep, and, good at this. But I think that what I think will happen, or I'm hoping will happen. Like, a lot of times when you see legislation happen and then they'll go, and then as a first act, this is what we're going to do. I feel that trend happening. Like we're doing PBM reform and this is what's going to come to the floor. And as a first act, we're going to find a way to like make Ozempic affordable. Like I'm oversimplifying, obviously. What do you think about that? You got a take?
Yeah. So, that must have been really interesting to be at that hearing. I did watch it
Yeah.
on television, and I think a couple things. So I think PBMs and pharma companies have been pointing at each other, saying you're the reason for the high prices for a long time,
Yeah.
and I think that keeps the prices high for both, and profits high for both, right? I think there's a certain reality to that they're kind of convenient foils of each other. I do think there's a need for policymaker action here, and I even wrote, the theme of the health conference was "Be Bold." I actually wrote a LinkedIn post and put it out there that well, my bold idea is a relatively small, modest, although it's not particularly modest, but modest change. It would be a modest change in one respect to the 503B decision-making framework, right? And so right now, the 503B list respects the shortage list, and the FDA gets to set the shortage list, and presumably they can determine if a medication is in shortage. We'll see. And so, but when it is in shortage, then you have this market-driven. The pharma companies can still price the meds however they like, but the compounding pharmacies can start producing essential copies. And that is how, as you mentioned, like 2 million people have found their medicine. It's the system doing exactly what it was designed to do.
Right.
Now, what if you had a high-priced med list and you the same decision flow, just a tiny little edit? Is it on shortage? Okay, then 503Bs can make essential copies. No, okay, then is it on the high-priced med list? Then 503Bs can make essential copies. And then policymakers can set that high-priced med list to be any number they like, right? They could say, well, let's look at the basket for the same exact medication at the same exact doses in these countries, Australia, Germany, UK, whatever the country mix is. And then if you charge us more than 150% of that, or 200% of that, then you're on the list, and you're going to face, you can still price it however you like. It's a free market, but you're going to face some competition. You're not going to get to do that without competition. So I would love to see that. Now, the only way you're going to see that, of course, is if you get legislative action. The other thing we also support, we support affordable choices however they come up. So that's kind of a more far-fetched. I wish it wasn't far-fetched, but we've seen Elizabeth Warren, we've seen Congressman Doggett, Senator Warren, Congressman Doggett call for acceleration of generics. We support that, of course. That would also help. But I don't know how optimistic we are about change. I think we're going to continue to call for it, but I think it's an uphill fight.
Can you tell us about how you called for it? Because that's how I found you.
No.
Yeah.
So we recommended 2 questions on the back of the Wall Street Journal to be asked at the hearing. I think that was, I think they're reasonable questions that should be asked, but that was probably maybe how you noticed it.
And what were the 2 questions?
I'm gonna look that up. I have that right in front of me.
I looked it up too, but it's not on my head, and it's not in. Yeah.
One was, if GLP-1 medications are removed from the FDA shortage list, patients trying to manage and treat obesity and diabetes will lose access to affordable non-branded versions of the medications. How will the pharmaceutical companies then meet the demand of these patients in particular? Now, we asked the question that way because demand is one of the factors the FDA can look at in deciding when to end the shortage, and we think it's one that they should look at. And then number 2, patients deserve options they can afford. To ensure these choices are available, should there be a lengthy grace period so that consumers may continue securing affordable non-branded versions of these medications until the prices of brand name versions fall? Now, I think that's another very reasonable take for policymakers to take, that we're going to remove the drug from the shortage list, but we're going to give people 90 days, 180 days.
Yeah.
Day one from removal of the shortage list, 503A pharmacies must stop. So distributing or face, I think, even criminal penalty. And so, it's going to be a real problem if the med is essentially still in shortage, but it's removed from in the sense that it's difficult to access, but it's removed from the shortage list, meaning all the compounded medications essentially come off the market. Now, maybe not all, because I think I'm sure there'll be some players that kind of push it, but you're gonna see folks also gravitate towards non-essential copy formulations, but it's just not clear what that supply chain will look like, and that's kind of still evolving right now. So you can't have as much faith that supply is going to be there.
Yeah, I think something to and I'm sure it's just something that you've heard before, but I will tell you that people with obesity who have realized a certain level of health, right, on these treatments, who have never been able to achieve it before, right? And I don't mean weight loss, I mean health, right? What has come from this? Because, like, for example, I don't know if you saw it, but there was a show for like Fox News that had it on where he was talking to, was it Bobby Kennedy Jr.?
Kennedy.
Yeah. And he specifically was like, it makes me worried that this is approved for like 8 indications. Why? Those all are because of obesity. Like almost all of them are because of obesity. That's why they're approved for those things. And it's because insurance is making us do that, right? Because we're saying, like, how do we get through? Because there's such, I think, a really big issue with obesity bias and fat bias and weight bias and all of those things. And people don't want to pay for these medications, right? So they're trying to get approved for these indications so they can get it in the hands of the people that are sick. That's my opinion. I just want to say it. But what I want to like say that I think is important and is that if we make this to where 503A and 503B pharmacies, who we all, I think as a industry, I don't know, have decided is probably the most safe, most reputable, most regulated, people are not going to stop, right? What's going to happen is they're going to go to all the other people out there that are not regulated. They're going to go to the peptide companies, or what we often refer to as what we would say gray market, black market,
gray market.
Yeah. And they're going to do it. And it's because they're desperate. And I think people don't understand that there is a shift because people who have it's shifting from, and I think society wise, right, from weight loss to health. And I do think that's where Noom is kind of trying to.
I can see that. Yeah. Where Noom is.
Yeah. So I'm that's my concern, right? Is it's not just people won't just, I think there are some people who will just stop and regain. Like they just will. They'll be at the highest dose, they'll stop. They don't have access anymore, they'll regain, whatever. But I think there will be even more people that will be online looking at online peptide companies and paying for retatrutide, right? Or what they think is retatrutide, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's going to happen. And then people are going to get sick. They're going to get taken advantage of, and we're going to be in a way worse situation, you know? And I have a concern about that. And I'm wondering if you've seen anything like that, or if people that you work with have heard or feel that way in.
I think that was the best I've heard it stated. I think that there's a good reason to be worried about that. Like when the shortage ends, there's a legal interpretation that the 503Bs basically will have to stop, right? Like there's legal interpretations. Frankly, the whole thing is fairly murky,
right?
But that is at least one interpretation. But the 503As will continue with their non-essential copy formulations. The 503As are not. I'm a supporter of 503A pharmacies. They're not doing it at the same scale with certificates of analysis, and so by definition, you're removing the kind of the best source, and it's not the 503As. It's really the gray market. The gray market is for experimental use or
the peptides industry.
And so you're
not
definitely
and consumption is literally on the bottle. And people do it.
It's going to be problematic. There's a 100% chance of that. And unless there's an affordable branded choice or affordable generic choice, or affordable non-essential copy produced by a compounding pharmacy, like that's what there should be.
Right.
We'll see. I mean, obviously we're talking to each other on election day. I think Washington is not going to have a viewpoint on any of this until we see who wins, and then whether or not change happens is another question.
Yeah.
Well, for so long, the drum has been beaten that obesity is such a giant public health issue, right? And I think there's some merit to that, and it needs a public health answer. As we see the obesity rates going down, like they've calculated, we're going to see even better returns, that if we can come to like, hey, public health dollars need to go to getting these medicine prices reduced and compensate the creators of them and everything. But we see like that whole range between 500 and 1,200 could really be shrunk by contributions from public health money. Like they've told us for so long, oh, it's the processed food industry, it's this and this, all these things. Great, throw the money, and then why don't you both pay for it? I would like to see more movement that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's interesting, and I also think, I mean, it's not the answer anybody wants, but I think with time, we're going to see additional GLP-1s hit the market, and many of these GLP-1s are fairly Me Too in the sense that they're in phase 2 trials now, let's say, but it's not, they might be a pill, or they might be a once a month shot, or they might even be weekly. But they're not necessarily dramatically different weight loss outcomes than tirzepatide, and that's going to put pressure on price better than anything else, because I think you're going to see some of these pharma companies realize the way to win the market is to eat up that compounding demand. And I think that that would be wise. Now, unfortunately, that's going to be a while because
2 years. I feel like 2 years at least.
Yeah, Lilly and Novo are the only ones with phase 3 trials right now, and they're not going to disrupt themselves probably. So it's going to be that next crop. So it's probably 2027, 28.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
let's hope they're working on a cheaper delivery system.
But it might not be.
Yeah, I think that's all very fascinating. Thank you so much for like kind of talking through it with us. I think a lot of people that are on these medicines, it's very difficult for me. And we interview doctors, we interview experts, all about this, and I know what I know. I know that those are very dangerous, but I got to tell you, if I was getting sick again, and when I have moments where my food noise comes back, when I get hungry, thank God I've learned skills, right? And these behavior changes and things we're talking about, I panic. And I'm telling you, like, that's what happens. And they're going to lean into the fact of all the years of misery and pain that they went through mentally and physically. And they're going to make these, I'm sorry, but uninformed or stupid choices. And I can't say that I'm any better. I really can't, because I have felt it. I have felt it before where I've gone, oh my God, it's back. Because you have so much relief. And it's not just the noise, right? It's the inflammation reduction. You will hear so many people in our community talk about because we know that obesity is a chronic inflammatory condition. We know that it affects all the organs in our bodies. And I think that what was interesting about the HELP committee, and we can sort of wrap up there, but is that when Bernie was having his opening statement, it was long and Bernie-like, but one thing that I feel like that he really pointed out is this is a health crisis. This is like all of, and I think it was Cassidy that mentioned Alzheimer's and research and innovation here and for other things, like, and how they all use the word miracle medication. Like,
right. Well, and then we see the same metabolic improvements prior to the weight loss, like you do with gastric bypass, right? There are clear metabolic improvements, especially the more metabolically damaged you are with the PCOS and the diabetes and things like that.
Right.
So hormonal, I would say that.
And I think like with the fact that I was encouraged to hear like our leaders, right, talk about obesity as the horrible disease that it is, and not just as people that need to lose weight, which I do feel like maybe from other companies that are more traditional diet culture that have recently decided to get into the space, it has been very diet focused as opposed to like wellness and overall health focused, which even people I think that start this journey, they are thinking about the weight. They are not thinking about the health because to them, doctors have told them forever, right? Your weight is the problem. Your weight is the problem. That's why they're focused on the scale, all those things. That's why they're kind of obsessed with it. I'm saying this because I was too, where that's how you think. And then when you start to feel all these changes, right, and have your body work like it should, you're not willing to let it go, you know? And I think when we, and I hope that the election outcome, and I'm not going to get into that, but other than I hope that we will move towards some sort of change in this area, because obesity could literally bankrupt our country because there are so many illnesses, right, that are associated with it. And the drain on our, not just our, and I have one more question for you, but not just the drain like on Medicare, like and where that's headed, right? But the drain on people that can't work anymore because they get like this, right? Which is very interesting. What do you think? You don't have to answer if you don't want to. You let me know. What do you think about what Eli Lilly is doing in the UK, where they're studying, right, to see if they can get people back to work? Because I can't help but tell these people, like, don't you want these kinds of citizens? Like, if 40% of America has obesity, don't you want these, like, people that I know that are on these medicines that had obesity and have to continue to persevere their whole life? They are baller. They are the most boss people I have ever met in my life. And it was just because they were sick. They're not lazy. They're not fat. It's nothing like that. You know, they were just sick people that needed medicine, and you give them that and all this amazing stuff happens. So I think it's interesting that the UK, right, is leading this effort. You know what I mean? And I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I think that's a positive partnership. I wouldn't say I'm overly educated on that, but I did see that report. As long as we're on Eli Lilly, I'm curious what you folks think about Lilly Direct, because like one of the things I noticed is the vials are single dose, which is a little different, right? They're similar in the compounding case, if you're familiar with receiving a multi-dose vial. And if you've seen the Novo recent letter to the FDA with a 40-page deck, one of the claims was that multi-dose vials are unsafe because people can draw too much and overdose. And yet at the same time, obviously it would seem strange. It would have to take many meds are dosed out of multi-dose vials. If you take that whole category away, then you're left, I guess, with single dose vials. And what's self-evident about a single dose vial is if you're on an in-between dose, which Noomers can be on because we don't dose only those doses. It's an enormous kind of desire, and it's kind of a natural human desire to say, oh, can I just save this? Can I just take this again?
Oh, for sure.
And it's wrong. You can't do that with a single dose vial because you'd risk an infection. But it just struck me that if you're going to create a vial, it might be rational to add the preservative to make it multi-dose because I think people are going to just naturally. People, you can abuse a vial either way. You can abuse a single dose vial by taking doses.
I mean, people that use vials for insulin, it's the same. I mean, like it.
Well, I have an answer. Yeah, I have an answer to that. We've actually seen it. It's out in the wild for 2 years for well over 1 million people using them, and the adverse effects are very minimal. Like it hasn't come to fruition. The sky is falling didn't fall.
Yeah. I just think it's one more reason to be like, oh, be afraid, be very, because that's what America does, especially is they're like, let me find a way to create the fear factor. Right. But I think you're right. And I will say in terms of the way Lilly is handled with the single dose vials, I do think that it's brilliant because what they're doing ultimately is cutting out the PBMs. Right. And if they can get their price right to where it is about what people would pay for compounding and they offered it in all of the doses, then I think they would take out the compound market. I think they would take it.
Yeah.
I agree.
But they'd have to offer.
Or they
health
would ship
services, and they'd
production
have
to
be
all
under
of the
certain
compounding
rules.
pharmacies.
And from what I'm told, so like pharmacies or telehealths, they can send in a script to Lilly Direct. Like it's not, you don't have to necessarily.
We do.
Yeah.
We do
We
Lilly
we
Direct.
do too.
Yeah.
Noom does too. Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think there's a
found
common
it-
misconception that that's not what happens. People don't know
Right.
that.
The availability is still tough.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even with
I mean,
Olivia.
I like the program, yeah, but I have seen the availability concern, but the 2.5 and 5 are kind of reasonable doses that can fit a host of situations. I was actually talking with our chief medical officer recently. It's pretty rare that we dose above 7.5 because of the side effect profile being so dramatic, and so 2.5 and 5 will serve a good portion of the market. I wish it wasn't just 2 flavors, but I think they're very smart, and that was a good addition.
It was brilliant. We were speculating like crazy when they got FDA approval for it in our community, and I was like, oh, that's how they're going to handle the overflow. That's how they're going to, and it is. It's just in a different way. I would absolutely love if we would completely remove PBMs from this, and everybody could just pay $500 and get their medicine, or $300 and get their medicine. I have a dream where Bernie talks about $100 a month. That'd be great, man. But I don't think that's going to happen, but if it could be what the market could bear. So if we also look what the market could bear in terms of compound, right? That's a perfect example that they know that they can get millions of people, at least 1 million we've talked about, right? To pay $300 a month for tirzepatide, for example, right? Like there are people that will pay that, it's that market would bear that. So if they could find a way to sell their medication that way, then it would solve a lot of the problems. But I suspect the issue is that they don't want to, or maybe they just can't handle the capacity for vials either. You know what I mean? Because we know the pens have been a big issue with manufacturers.
Yeah, I think also, there's this sense of marketing too, pharmaceutical companies tend not to be, they spend a lot on consumer marketing, of course, of the brand names, but they tend to be very regulated, and I think I think there's also an aspect of it which is people may want both, right? Like the app and the the behavior change program and the med, they seek a multimodal weight loss journey, and maybe they'll figure that out over time.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, and the reality is we can deliver that via virtual health with the medications still under the $500 price point and make it more affordable for the insurers to cover. And then we know, and all of our materials, and I know I peeked at your materials at conference. We show that with the 2 programs combined, they have a much, much better rate of success. One of the things I've heard from different companies is, we have this many people on it, but a lot drop off and don't have success. Right. And we know that the marrying of the drug with the program really makes it successful, and that will deliver for the employer. Right. That will give success for the employer or whoever's providing the insurance.
I do think that
there's an answer
to your point about the employer piece. Cause obviously we want people to have this covered by, insurance and stuff.
Right.
I think there are still a lot of companies that it's not just the cost, but I do think there's still quite a stigma, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Around covering obesity medicine, weight loss shots, and all those kinds of language. I think there's a lot of ignorance, and ignorance to me just means not informed. I don't mind. I mind willful ignorance, but I do not mind people that don't know. That's what our podcast does, right? But I think that it would be interesting to see how Noom could work with companies, right, to get them to understand. And I'm wondering if it makes it a little bit more palatable, right, for you to say, oh, no, they're not just going to be off on the weight loss shot getting sick and vomiting. We're going to be guiding them, and we're going to be helping them, and maybe we help them get off the medicine, because a lot of people, they're thinking about this like phentermine. They're like, you get on, you get off. I'm not thinking about this, about insulin resistance and stuff, because there's nothing. There's not enough knowledge there. There's just not. And I don't know if they're necessarily be receptive. I would hope so eventually, but let's, we gotta go slow. But I'm wondering if a company like Noom with the behavior piece would make it more like, okay, maybe we do that, might help with some of that bias and ignorance, you know? I don't know, like I'm hopeful.
We do wrap the solution, as a more than meds program. So like, yes, meds and so I think that may well resonate with treating kind of the whole person, and getting that benefits manager kind of over the hump. I can see that.
Well, and especially when they're already spending, and I'm just going to use the same example we're not going to say from earlier. They're spending quite a bit a month for some of the other big national programs just for counting points.
Yes. And ultimately, too, that has been quite the gate for many of us in this community, where we have had our insurance all of a sudden like cover obesity medicine, but they've been like, just kidding. You need to go on this particular program, traditional, for 6 months, and then we'll decide if you are worthy enough to have medication to treat you further. If we think that you can do it on your own, which is just a shit message anyway. Sorry, I got to say it. But that is very common. That 6-month roadblock, you better do this with a diet program. And it is usually the one that we were talking about. And
insurers are adding that in. Like I hear of a new one every day.
It's just like a stall tactic. It really is it's like another gate, and it's another problem for us to deal with. So,
and that goes back to, it's just bias. It's like, you've done this to yourself. Why should we pay for it?
Yes. I think that's very true. Yeah. At least that's our experience within our community and what we hear from others. But I'm encouraged to, because I don't think a lot of companies have taken that corporate position. I feel like Noom is trying to do that go to market strategy. So I'm very encouraged to see how that might land.
Our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Adonis Saremi, his protocol, and he feels passionate about this, is that you don't start with a behavior change, right? Like in this day and age, you should get the medication. If you go in for any condition to a doctor's office, they don't say, well, try to, some throat exercises to get your sore throat to improve.
Very true.
So, I think that probably will feel antiquated 4 or 5 years from now. As I think that is where society is moving past that. I do believe that.
Yeah, and I like that your perspective when you talk about 4 to 5 years from now, it'll seem kind of antiquated. So
I really hope so, because
I feel that.
It's very hard to see. It's very hard to see our people suffer. I know that sounds dramatic, but when you're on TikTok and when you're on IG and you're on these social media platforms, it's very painful to see these people lose their medicine or not be able to get their medicine, and the regain, and them trying to live their lives in these bodies that are full and swollen, and blame themselves and the mental stuff that goes with it. And they can't stick to the behavior changes that they were sticking to so well because they had the medicine and they were placed to receive. It is very painful for us. I feel, and I think that many companies, and I don't mean this in a bad way, like Noom, can be very much removed from that because you're not in the community and creating, right? And so when I hear 2 years and 3 years and 5 years from a business perspective, that sounds amazing, right? And from a societal change perspective, that sounds amazing. But it's hard for us because we're sick and we want it now and we don't want to die. That's what it comes down to, because we all have this disease. It is progressive and it is killing us, and we want treatment now. And so that's why it's one of the reasons I wanted you to come on, because I wanted you to talk about how you're doing things a little different and how you could possibly offer more access, right, to our people. So is there a place where people can learn more about Noom to see if it's an option for them, especially for GLP-1 journey? And can you tell us where we can find you on socials and stuff if people want to follow?
Sure. So, of course, Noom.com, Noom is where to find us, and easy to find our socials there too. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find as Geoff Cook, Geoff. I spell it wrong, basically. COOK. But that's probably my primary social. I'm on Twitter, but I'm not much of a user, or X, I guess.
Me either. I was like,
I was going to
Oh,
build
yeah,
an
Geoff
account
Cook, you were
tonight
there.
to enjoy all the comments.
Right.
yeah. Well, it has been lovely. I definitely, before we end, because you've given us so much of your time, thank you. Is there
Yeah,
anything
thank
that
you so
you
much.
want to say or share that we didn't cover?
No, I think you kind of summed it up. Like, we want treatment now. I wrote that down.
Mhm.
I think, that's why we're, we went down that compounding route, and we then,
Yes.
were kind of forceful in defending the route we went down. But I think, like, that's a good mantra to just, and I'll bring that back to the team. We want treatment now, right? Like,
Mhm.
not 5 years from now, not when it's generic semaglutide.
Yeah.
We need the solution now.
Yes.
I think that's a good framing.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to hear that we could affect anything. So I appreciate you so much for giving us your time.
Appreciate your time.
And team and Plus SideZers, I will put all the information in the show notes of this episode so that you can explore to see if this is an option for you, or perhaps even maybe talk to your benefits manager, right, of having this be a program, right, at your company. Maybe this is a way for you to kind of use the messaging we've been talking about. Oh, no, it's not weight loss meds, right? It's whatever it takes, guys.
Right. And if you,
Whatever it takes,
yeah, I have a whole package I can give people to give to their benefits managers if they
Nice.
need information, so they can find me on there.
Let's put it in the
I'm
notes.
happy to send them a package.
For more resources too. Yes, I love that. Okay. Well, it's been a lovely conversation. We appreciate it so much. And crew, we will see you next week. You're not alone. It's not your fault. Hasta la pasta.
Thank you so much.
"20 seconds a week to lose 20% of your weight in a year with diet and exercise. That's the power of GLP-1s through Ro. Ro helps find the medication that's right for you, based on cost, availability, and your weight loss goals. Losing weight with GLP-1s is possible through Ro.
Are you interested in understanding GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, or Mounjaro? Then join us on the Plus SideZ Cracking the Obesity Code, the groundbreaking podcast helping people change their lives one episode at a time. The Plus SideZ Podcast is a disruptor. We're breaking down barriers, smashing stereotypes, and sharing inspiring stories that'll leave you feeling informed and empowered. Join us every week to learn from doctors who are specialists around GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro. They'll provide you with science and facts to validate these incredible stories. But that's not all. We'll also bring you the voices of the GLP-1 Mounjaro TikTok community, real people who face the challenges of obesity-related diseases and disorders and discovered the incredible plus sides of GLP-1 medications. Our episodes are filled with heartwarming stories, laughter, and moments of triumph. You'll connect with our amazing community members who are reclaiming their health and experiencing their fullest lives. Are you ready to embark on a journey of discovery and empowerment? Tune in to the Plus SideZ Cracking the Obesity Code, and together we'll change the narrative around obesity and end the stigma. Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and join our incredible community. Let's celebrate the plus sides of life together, because every story deserves to be heard. Every life deserves to shine, and everyone deserves access to expert knowledge and medication. The Plus SideZ Podcast. You're not alone. It's not your fault.